Let's read some creepy Home Alone stories. At the time, I was living in the basement of my boyfriend's parents' house. He had lived in that basement for years and always told me about shadows moving quickly across corners and walls and other unsettling things happening. I always thought he was exaggerating. It was in the middle of a weekday, and I was the only one home. I was cleaning and doing laundry. I had a radio plugged in playing a local station, and their dog was in the basement with me. I was bending over to pick up another piece of laundry to fold when I saw a shadow out of the corner of my eye shoot across a dark corner of the hallway. I figured it was just my mind playing with me. I went back to folding. Suddenly, the lights flickered on and off, and the radio flickered in and out, then turned to static for a few seconds before going silent. At the exact same time, the dog's hair stood on end, and she ran, tail tucked, up the stairs. I called her to come back, but she stood at the top of the stairs, barking frantically, refusing to come down. I believed my boyfriend after that. Yeah, if you tell me your basement is haunted, don't worry about me. I am not going down there. When my wife left for work at 9 p.m., I called my friends and told them to get their asses on the game. We played until 2 a.m., but we would have played more if it weren't for the events that happened this night. My headphones were at maximum volume, so I could barely hear anything. I had my dog beside me and felt really safe. What was most unsettling, though, was that my PC was positioned away from any windows and doors, so I couldn't see anything behind me. Thankfully, I had the bright idea of giving my dog treats just for the company. He would always go away if I had no treats or when he felt like it, so I kept a bag close. At around 2:10, I was thinking of getting off but continued to play. Suddenly, out of nowhere, my dog springs up from his bed and starts going full-on berserk mode. I took my headphones off and looked behind me, and I saw 2 eyes staring at me through the window. What was most scary was I could only see the eyes and nothing else. I jumped up in fear and grabbed a kitchen knife and called my wife. After she came back home, we searched for any signs of the intruder still being here. We called the police too. They didn't find anything. We've moved since that day. This happened over a decade ago when I was 12 years old. I live in a small town in Oklahoma, and in my neighborhood the houses are fairly spread apart, separated by woods. It was a school day, so my grandma picked me up from school and brought me home. This was the first year that I got dropped off at my house alone. Before this, I would just go to my grandma's house after school. I would get dropped off at around 3 p.m., and my parents would be home around 4:30. Not that big of a deal. Today, for some reason, my dad wasn't going to be home until later, around 7, and my mom, a teacher, wouldn't be home until around 8 p.m. because she had parent-teacher conferences at the school. This happened in early fall, so it wouldn't even be dark until like 8:30 p.m. I did what I usually did when I got home. I ran upstairs, got on my Xbox 360, and played Minecraft with my friends. Today it was just me and my friend Seth. I was playing for about 2 hours when I heard a car door shut in my driveway. No one should have been here until like 7 p.m. My house is set up to where my upstairs has windows that look over my driveway. So, with my mic on and controller in hand, I went to the window to see who it was. Maybe my dad got home earlier than expected. I looked outside. It was a red truck. No one I know drives a red truck. The person pulled into the middle of my driveway sideways, like he owned the place. When I looked out the window, I saw a man with a hat, wearing a big camo hoodie and jeans. It was September, so no one should have been wearing a big hoodie and jeans in Oklahoma. By the time I looked, he was already almost out of view, going up my walkway to my front door. I thought maybe it was one of my dad's friends or someone my dad hired to do something, but he would usually tell me if someone was going to be coming over. Soon after, I heard a knock at the door, then another. I go to my other window that has a better view of the walkway up to my front door. I see the guy walking back down the walkway. I switch and go back to looking through the windows overlooking my driveway. I'm relaying all of this to Seth, still with my mic on. I tell Seth that he's walking back to his truck now. Instead, he walks past his truck and tries to open my garage side door. At this point, my heart sinks. I tell Seth that this guy just tried to get into my house. Mind you, it is literally broad day at like 5 p.m. Luckily, it was locked because sometimes we forget to lock it. After he tried the door, he starts walking to my back patio. I drop my headset and I quietly run downstairs to see what he is doing. I get downstairs and stand behind the wall, so I'm not visible from the back door/living room windows. I just listen. I hear him try to open the door, then I hear a thud. It sounded like he dropped a brick on the ground or something. At this point, I'm more scared than I've ever been. I wanted to call my parents or grandma, but I didn't have a cell phone yet. The only phone in my house was in my kitchen. I would have to cross my living room to get there, and he would be able to see me if I went in there. A few seconds after the thud, I peeked around the corner and he was gone. I ran back upstairs and put my headset back on, telling Seth that he just tried to open the back door as well. As I'm telling him this, I hear a car door shut. This time when I look out the window, he finally got in his truck. I looked at the truck closer, and I noticed the only thing he has in his truck bed was a crowbar and a shovel. He sat in his truck for what felt like a few minutes. During this time, Seth told me to get my iPod and take a picture of his license plate. He was parked to where I couldn't see. Then he drove backwards out of my driveway and down the road. A few minutes after he was confirmed gone, I went downstairs to see what the thud could have been. I get to the back door and see that the doormat was moved. Both big plant pots had been moved as well. He was looking for a key. Holy fuck. We have a hidden key back there too. The key to the back door was under one of the smaller plant pots on a ledge near the door, not the bigger ones that he had checked under. I went to the front porch and all the pots looked like they had been moved too. I don't know what I would have done if he was able to find the key or if he just broke in. After he left, I called my dad and told him what happened. When my dad got home, he had a cop come over and I told him what happened and gave him a description. The guy never came back. See, this is why I will never have a spare key to my house outside of my house. That's insane. Let's read some creepy first date stories. One time I went out with someone, and while driving around, he was making comments about how we were dangerously close to running out of gas and couldn't understand why we didn't find a gas station when it felt like we just passed by so many. He made jokes about us having to camp out together, and I didn't like it. It felt weird. Then our GPS couldn't load, and he kept managing to get us lost, thus making more jokes about being stuck together for the night. It wasn't said humorously. When we finally got back to my car, it felt like I was being watched, and I kept seeing something white in the corner of my eye, and then he started wanting to tell ghost stories in his car. I was all sorts of freaked out. It felt like his goal was to keep me in the car, until I kept saying how many people have my location. But it had a touch of paranormal feels throughout the night. Okay, yeah, not only was this man creepy, like getting y'all lost, but also creepy paranormal. Like, was this man a demon? Was he haunted? Hell no. So this happened like a decade ago. I can't remember her name or how we met. My first memory is sitting with her late at night in a noisy pub on a first date. The waitress had just taken our drink order. So we were talking about this and that, and the conversation happens onto funny video clips. So I show her a funny video clip on my phone. She giggles and proceeds to show me one. So I take her phone, and it's a clip of a man getting his head cut off by religious extremists. This feeling of horror, sorrow, and total emptiness comes over me, like a void, like a vast body of dark waters. There's nothing to say, nothing to do, no witty comeback, nowhere to go from here, because it's seen, and it can never be unseen, and I wasn't given a choice in the matter. I just stare at her phone until it locks and the light goes off. I look up at her, and she is just sitting there, taking in my reaction, smiling. There was no second date. Okay, listen, I am all into like creepy, scary, horror stuff, but I don't think, if I was on a first date, I don't think I would show them a video like that. At least not without their consent. Friday evening, I agreed to meet someone for a drink that I met on Facebook dating. We had several Facebook friends in common, including my ex-husband's first wife, so I figured giving him my cell number was okay. We met up, and while he was pleasant enough, he started going on and on about his connections to very prominent local people/police, etc., and bragging about all of his real estate. We wound up walking to another place a couple blocks away, and he started putting his hand on my thigh and making me uncomfortable. I texted one of my friends when he was in the bathroom, telling her all of this. I had also sent her his profile. I decided to go home because he continued to make unwanted advances and my spidey senses were going off. I told him he was weirding me out. When I got home, he texted me repeatedly, begging me to call him. Then he called 3 to 4 times. I didn't respond or answer. Yesterday morning, my friend did a little sleuthing on this dude, and he was arrested in 2017 for child SA. He had also given me a fake last name. Then he texted me like nothing happened. I responded that I didn't want to continue and wished him the best. I was honestly a little scared at that point and didn't want to set him off. Well, apparently, he's a stalker too, because he called me late last night 6 times between 12 a.m. and 12:30 a.m., and twice this morning. I had my ringer off, thankfully. I blocked him immediately, but now I'm concerned. I live alone, and it would be easy to find out my last name via mutual Facebook friends. Maybe I've watched too much Dateline, but I'm very uneasy. I've never had something like this happen before. Anyway, ladies, be safe out there. If you meet someone online or like through someone, always Google them. Do they have any mugshots? And I'm not shaming anybody for going to jail, okay? But what are the charges? Because some aren't that bad, whatever, but some are really bad. You need to know who you're going on a date with, so freaking Google them. We've all had bad dates, right? This is the only date I've had to date that rang every alarm bell and waved every red flag. I'll preface this by saying I don't go on many dates, but when I do, I make sure I follow safety protocol by only meeting my date in public places. Let either family or friends know where I'm going and park in a populated place close by to wherever we meet. Anyway, this date initially suggested we meet at his house to watch a movie and have a few drinks. And I said no, I don't feel comfortable with that, and I only want to meet in public. He seemed okay with this, but then brought it up a few more times, and I said if money is an issue, we could meet up another time or forget about it altogether. But my date backtracked and went with my idea of meeting at a cafe I chose. Anyway, he turns up in a 2-door car. This detail is relevant. And goes into the cafe, and I follow behind and introduce myself. After a polite introduction, things begin to get weird. I order a Coke, and he says, "Don't you want a drink?" I was going to pop into bar, which is connected to the cafe, and get one. I say no, I'm not drinking, and he looks at me like, what the fuck, as if I'm being unreasonable. I already explained in messages I don't drink as I'm on medication, so having to re-explain it again pissed me off. He seems disappointed and goes to order a cider from the bar while I get a table. Anyway, we sit down with our drinks, and date immediately goes on about going back to his place again, even though the original plan was to stay here and order food, and I already stated that was not happening. He says something along the lines of having a few drinks and eating at his place, and I said we don't have to eat, we can just have our drinks and leave. He gets defensive and says he has money, but prefers it if we go back to his. I make a joke and say, "You're not a killer, are you?" And instead of laughing it off, he stares at me uncannily and says, "You don't think I would hurt you, do you?" I laugh uncomfortably and say, "Of course not, but really, I'm relieved this date won't be going any further." Date suddenly says, "Are you going to follow me in your car? Because that wouldn't make sense. How about we go in my car? But I've got packages in the front, so you'll have to squeeze in the back, and I'll drop you back off to your car after." In reality, that made less sense than me following him in my own car and then driving home from his house after. The fact it was completely illogical made it even more creepy in my mind. Every alarm bell was going off at this point. I said, "Look, I don't want to go to yours, and your insistence is giving me the creeps." Date looks shocked, mumbles something about needing the toilet, and excuses himself from the table. A few minutes later, I see him through the cafe window getting into his car and driving off. Massive bullet dodged, in my opinion. Also, the fact his car didn't have back doors made it even more sinister, because imagine if something happened in the car and I couldn't escape. Yeah, I was reading some of the comments on this story, and people were saying, this guy did not have good intentions. He was upset that you weren't drinking. Duh, because now you're going to be sober and of sound mind. He can't spike your drink. He can't take advantage of you. And him wanting you to ride in the back seat of his 2-door car? That's creepy. this person is really smart. And yeah, I did it a million times in my younger single days, okay? Going to people's houses that you meet online. No, you should always meet somebody in a well-lit, populated place. And don't let any motherfucker try to convince you into drinking. Let's talk about some conspiracy theories. Okay, so I just went to Reddit and typed in conspiracy theories in the search bar. And I came across this thread, what's the craziest conspiracy theory you actually believe? No judgment here. We're living in a time where almost nothing feels too strange anymore. Share the theory you believe and explain why it makes sense to you. And this was posted 3 months ago, so very recent. Okay, so let's scroll through and see what conspiracy theories people mention and what they have to say about it. There's more to Antarctica than they're telling us. Oh my gosh, I believe in this wholeheartedly. I went down a deep rabbit hole on Antarctica, and I guess like one of the conspiracy theories I heard about Antarctica is that Antarctica is actually like a portal to a place that is so beautiful and so much better than this, and only the elite have access to that, and they're not telling us about it. Either way, whatever is going on down there, it is so weird because the world can't agree on anything. There's wars every day, but everybody, all of the leaders can agree on not fucking with Antarctica. No, something's going on down there. The phone listens. Happened multiple times where I have had a conversation, did not Google or ask Siri, etc., just a face-to-face convo, and the topic of conversation shows up as an ad. Dude, that has been happening to me for years. Like, I could be talking about pickled radishes, and I've never looked up pickled radishes on my phone, and I'll open my phone and I'll see a video for pickled radishes. Like, that is so freaking weird and so true. We're being energetically farmed by an interdimensional reptilian race that feeds off low frequencies that we emit when we have negative emotions. They've strategically set the whole world up to make everyone as miserable and stressed and unhealthy as possible, because when we feel bad and the frequency emanating from our electromagnetic field becomes low, they consume these low frequencies as their food in a sense. It's the root of all issues on our planet. I totally believe this. Like alcohol is horrible for you. As somebody who had a horrible alcohol problem for the majority of their life, I stopped drinking in 2023. But like, alcohol is legal and it makes you depressed. It makes you do stupid things. At least I did stupid things while drinking. Yeah, and it just keeps you at a low vibration. But that's legal. But this isn't legal everywhere, and this is actually proven like to help people and make people feel better. They don't want us feeling better. And if this became legal everywhere, that would put so many other businesses like out of business or just making less money. That's a whole other conspiracy. But anyway, I definitely think that they are trying to keep us low. They show us bad things everywhere that makes us scared. Like, what is that called? Like fear mongering or whatever. I also heard of another conspiracy the other day about how the government hires people to drive on roads and create more traffic. So, like rush hour traffic, like the government hires people to drive in that traffic to make more traffic, and obviously traffic pisses you off. And then you get home, you're in a bad mood, maybe you're mean to your partner or your kids because you're so stressed out. And also being that stressed out, that makes you not want to do like good things for yourself. You're just gonna be pissed, come home, have a beer, smoke a little or something like that, and then not get anything done. And that's not progressive and good for you. Anyway, I could talk about this one for freaking ever. They are 100% trying to keep us down, and we cannot let the bastards grind us down. Okay, moving on. That little people live in the ground. Someone says, go on. I don't know why that's so funny to me. I've never heard that before. Let's see if anybody gives us some context. Okay, there's really no context in what that person said, but I have like heard of the conspiracy of people living like in the center of the earth. Like there was like those 2 kids a long time ago that people found, and their skin was green, and I think their eyes may have been black, and they said they lived like underground, like in the center of the earth or something like that. They were from somewhere completely different. I mean, I believe that. I've never been to the center of the earth, so I don't know what's in there. Oh, here's a good one. That Britney Spears is. Someone commented, I remember videos of her on Insta where it looked like someone else using an AI face filter. It was so weird. And then someone else said, yeah, and I've been seeing more. And at first I was like, how ridiculous. And now I'm like, but what if? I don't understand how her video quality is so distorted and grainy when I'm sure she could afford a phone with a higher def camera. Her censorship has ended and she's never really photographed out and about. With all the AI and fake stuff, reality feels so distorted to me now. That's actually a really good point. I feel like we don't really see her photographed like out and about. That's really sad if that's true, because I'm a 90s kid, 93, so I grew up on Britney Spears, and that is just so terrible what happened to her. When you dream about yourself in various situations, you are actually viewing yourself through the lens of another you in another dimension, living in infinite parallel existences created at random. I feel like I kind of believe this one too. Like, we did a video the other day on astral projection and like talked about like vivid dreams, that they feel so real. I don't know. I feel like some dreams can just be random, like whatever you're thinking about in your subconscious, but some dreams feel so real that I do question if that is myself, like in another dimension. If there's another me in another dimension, I hope she's doing a lot better than I am, honestly. Okay, we're gonna end on this one. The wealthiest people on earth, bankers, politicians, and billionaires, are part of some exclusive club where they partake in secret rituals, gloat about their wealth, and discuss strategies about how to control the world. Well, after everything that's come out recently, we all now know that that is true. But even before this came out, girl, I've been saying that. We are being controlled. Don't let the bastards grind you down. Let's read another scary Reddit story. I was 18 years old, female, when this happened. At the time, I was living at home with my parents, who had recently moved far out into the countryside. Their farm was part of a tiny rural cluster, about 7 farms on one road. That night, I was home alone with our dog, a large Labrador I was looking after until my parents came back the next day. It was around 11 p.m. I was laying on the upstairs couch with a movie playing quietly on the TV, half asleep and relaxed in the stillness of the house. Then 3 loud knocks shattered the silence. They came from the front door downstairs, the door directly at the bottom of the staircase leading up to where I was. The sound was sharp and deliberate, not hesitant, not accidental. My dog sprang out of his bed beside me and started barking immediately. I tried to calm him, but he was beyond listening. He bolted down the stairs and positioned himself in front of the door, barking and growling into the darkness. Outside, the courtyard was completely black. I stood halfway down the staircase, my pulse hammering in my ears, and called out, "Hello?" No reply, just silence. I called again, louder this time. Still nothing. The quiet that followed felt wrong, thick and watchful. After a moment that felt much longer than it was, I forced myself to move. I stepped down the rest of the stairs, my dog still tense at the door. Carefully, I opened it just enough to lean my head outside. There was nothing there. No lights, no movement, no footsteps fading away, only the dark courtyard in the cold night air. It felt like whoever or whatever had knocked had simply vanished. I shut the door quickly and locked every entrance in the house. My hands were shaking as I called my parents. They immediately contacted our neighbors, a couple who lived nearby. Within minutes, they arrived. I explained what had happened, still trying to steady my voice. They decided to walk around the barns and check the property. Those 10 minutes felt endless. When they returned, they said they hadn't found anything. Still, they strongly suggested I come sleep in their guest room for the night. I told them it was probably just me overreacting if nothing had been found, but they kept insisting, more seriously than I expected, that it would be safer to come with them. I refused. I couldn't leave my dog. Before leaving, they told me to call immediately if anything else happened, no matter how small. When my parents returned the next day, they installed surveillance cameras outside the front door. They said it was to make me feel safer, especially since I was often home alone with the dog. A few months later, my parents were celebrating their 25th wedding anniversary. During the evening, I found myself talking with my female neighbor and thanked her again for coming over that night. Her expression shifted. She went quiet for a moment, like she was weighing whether to say what was on her mind. Then, she told me she had to be honest with me. That night, shortly before my parents called her, she had been outside saying goodnight to her horses. The yard was completely still. No wind, no distant cars, nothing. That's when she heard it. Footsteps. Clear, deliberate footsteps crunching through the gravel in our courtyard. Not random, not hurried. Slow, controlled. Like someone walking with purpose in the dark. She said the sound carried unnaturally well in the silence. Then the footsteps stopped. Right there in the yard. She waited to hear them continue, to hear someone speak, a door, anything. But there was only a heavy, suffocating silence, and just moments later, my parents called her about the knocking. She told me she never heard those footsteps leave. And that is one of the stories that's going to be on my new podcast episode that comes out tomorrow, so make sure you're following me on Spotify. And while you're at it, go ahead and follow me on YouTube too, why not? Let's talk about living in a simulation. Okay, so I just went to Reddit and I typed in real simulation stories. And I found this thread. What are some experiences you've had that make you believe we might be living in a simulation? So let's read some of the comments and see what people have to say. Precognitive dreams, synchronicities, especially the ones where I'm thinking to myself and I say a specific word in a sentence in my head, and a second or two later I hear or see it somewhere in the world. The radio, a video, billboard. It happens often and the words are specific. Okay, we talked about this in the conspiracy theory videos. We know the phone can hear you. We talk about things and then the phone will start showing us ads and stuff. But a lot of people say, and this has happened to me too, that they'll just be thinking about something and then it'll appear in an ad somewhere. That's freaking weird. I live on a small, quiet road and I never see or hear anyone walking or driving on it. Then the minute I try to go anywhere from my house, there are endless cars turning onto the road. People walking their dogs, mailmen showing up, the electric company fixing a line, etc. Okay, this is so true. I live kind of far out, and I swear there is never anybody driving down my road. And the second, I sit down to, record my podcast, or the second I go outside to walk my dog, there's all of a sudden people everywhere, cars everywhere. And someone left a comment saying, I feel like 95% of the time when I'm eating out, I walk into an empty restaurant, and by the time I'm leaving, there's a line out the door. That always happens to me too. That's weird. Okay, this one's interesting. One time I was driving down a forest road. I drive down several times a week, daytime and nighttime. It was dark, and for some reason, I was driving slower than usual. My partner asked why, and I said, I don't know, I just really don't want to hit a badger. Now, keep in mind, I've never seen a badger in person. They're really quite elusive around here. I just had a sense that I didn't want to hit, specifically, a badger, not a fox. Plenty common here, not a hedgehog, a badger. Well, lo and behold, a few minutes after this, a badger wandered out in front of my car, and I was driving slow enough that I had plenty of time to stop and let it cross. Never seen a badger since. Maybe it was the badger gods, sending this person a signal to slow down so they don't hit a badger. I have a mirror on the opposite side of my bed, and as I sat down and placed my drink onto the bedside table, out of the corner of my eye, my reflection was still facing the mirror as opposed to reaching over sideways. Hell no. That's never happened to me, but sometimes I do be looking at the mirror to make sure that it's going the same way I am. I have a mirror right here. I do be looking, and that would scare the shit out of me if that happened. One time I was walking downtown and saw a minor car wreck happen right in front of me. A Subaru got its side panel crushed in pretty good. I forgot about it. Then about 3 years later, I'm walking in a completely different part of town, and for no reason, I start thinking about that Subaru that got hit. About 20 seconds after I start thinking about it, it came around the corner. Same car with the same damage I had seen happen 3 years earlier. Okay, so did they never get their car fixed? Or is it all fake and a simulation? Me thinking about someone I haven't seen in ages. Next thing you know, they reappear in my life within 24 hours. This is not a one-time thing, at least 10 times throughout my lifetime. Okay, that has happened to me so many times too. That is so weird. Worked with special needs kids for about a decade. Show up to work one day, greet one of the clients, and he tells me to shut the hell up and leave him alone, or he is going to throw beers at me from the roof of my apartment, which was exactly how my dream from the night before had ended. I freaked out a bit after that. Spent the next decade in denial. Now I'm mature enough to admit we don't know shit about fuck. That is so true. We don't know anything. Leave a comment if you've ever experienced something that made you think we're living in a simulation. Let's read a couple scary stories that were sent to us. My niece has had many paranormal interactions, so here are some of them. I'm going to call her Kate for these stories. So, Kate has 2 mirrors in her room. They don't point towards each other or her bed, but one of them is by the end of her bed. And almost every night for 2 years, she would see the top hat man at the end of her bed. One night, I was having a sleepover with her, and it was around 2:30 a.m., and I saw him staring at her while she was asleep. So I just closed my eyes and didn't look at him, and eventually went back to sleep. One night that she saw him, she also saw wet footprints leading away from her side of the bed. She also had this face that she would see in the corner of her room, staring down at her, and she would just feel dread every time she saw it. Another time, Kate was sitting on her bed on her phone with her elbows touching her mattress, and she felt a sharp pain in her left elbow as if something had bit her. She asked her friend, who was a witch, about it, and she said that the top hat man or one of the other entities in her room were trying to get her attention. It left a mouth-sized bruise on her elbow. Since all of these incidents, her mom has had the house blessed, and nothing else has happened since. Oh, I should mention, Kate lives within 45 minutes of Skiggly Wiggly Ranch. Well, there is your problem. Also, I don't know who the Top Hat Man is. Let's look up the Top Hat Man. A widely reported shadowy humanoid figure, often appearing during sleep paralysis, characterized as a dark 6-foot-tall silhouette wearing a wide-brimmed hat. That is terrifying. We were on holiday in France at the time, staying in an Airbnb. We stayed in this pretty quiet area near Disneyland, which was where we were going. It was dark out and my parents were not home as they had left to go grab food for dinner, and since the only supermarkets nearby were in a massive mall, they were gone for a while. The Airbnb was a hotel type of building with many rooms on each floor. We were in a room at the end of the hallway. Me and my siblings were around 11 to 16 years old, and there were 4 of us. And naturally, after a day of walking around the city, our parents left us at the Airbnb while they grabbed food quickly. Now this is where things get creepy. We were all in different rooms when there was a frantic knock at the door. At first, I thought it was my dad messing around as he had knocked the same way previously. This building was pretty old and didn't have a doorbell, may I add. So, me being the oldest, I was the one to go check the door. I looked through the peephole and weirdly enough, I didn't see anyone there. I thought I may have heard another person knocking at someone else's door, or maybe someone was playing a prank. So I went back to the living room and was watching TV for a while when my sister came running to me saying she was looking through the peephole, just playing around pretending to be a spy, when she saw someone leave the elevator. She was crying when she explained she saw a person, only not a person. She said it was tall, too tall, and that it was very thin and just so strange. I tried calming her down, saying she must just be paranoid. Other people live on this floor. It must have been someone who lives here, and that her parents would be home soon. Now, she agreed with me, and I think she was too scared to imagine that it could have been something else. She didn't leave me, and we just watched TV when I heard, "May, we're home. Can you open the door?" May is my name, and the voice was my father's voice, so I naturally went to the door. I looked in the peephole and saw the same looking person my sister had explained earlier. I was terrified and immediately called my parents asking where they were, as I had heard my dad's voice and there was someone staring at our door from down the hallway. They came home as fast as they could and were panicking since we had no adults with us. I don't know what that thing was, whether it was a mimic or just a creature trying to lure us into opening the door or what, but we haven't been back there since, and I still have nightmares about what could have happened if I had opened the door. I would love it if people from France would leave me a comment. Do y'all have mimics and like skiggly wigglies out there? What is like the folklore in France, you know? I would love to know. Let's read some real Bigfoot stories. I live in the Sierra Nevada foothills of California, 7 acres of land, most densely forested and wild. There is a very large pond half a mile behind my house on a neighboring property. My closest neighbor was this old lady who left her home because her husband passed away and she couldn't take care of herself, so for many years it sat abandoned. 3 years ago, I was outside just before sunset doing some work in my side yard, and I looked over at my neighbor's house. This house was about 100 to 130 yards away from my house. I saw this large creature walking upright, all black, top to bottom, walking upright, heading downhill towards the pond. What weirded me out at first was that the arms were too long. My brain kept trying to assume that it was a person carrying something. It moved quick, and the temperature was hot outside, so it would be bonkers to be wearing an all-black suit on empty property with no vehicles around and walking straight into the dense woods. I called my neighbor, who was staying with her children in another city, immediately and asked her if a large person was supposed to be on her property. She said no. Right after that, I started looking into this whole Bigfoot thing and became a believer. Also, black bears live in the area and occasionally hit up my trash can, but this creature definitely didn't walk like a black bear. Friend and I were walking on a trail through the woods late at night. It was almost pitch black with no moon, but we knew those woods like the back of our hands and were able to navigate. As we were walking, we suddenly heard brush being knocked over up ahead on our right about 10 or 15 yards. We both froze in fear. I can't speak for my friend, but in my mind, I had no idea what could be traversing through the thick brush like that late at night in the pitch black. As it passed by us, roughly 5 yards to our right, I'll never forget the gait in which it walked. Then, when it was directly next to us, it stepped on a branch, and the snap it made sounded like it was a 4 or 5 inch log. Then, just as quickly as it came, it was gone. I was staying at my sister's house in Carver, Massachusetts. She lives very close to a swamp in a state park. I had my dog with me, and he did not want to go outside, which was very unlike him. I brought him back in and went out to have a smoke. Then I heard a knock. It sounded like a wooden baseball bat. I thought to myself, that sounds like a knock. Then a second later, that sounds like a knock. So when my sister came home, I told her about it. She told me a few days before she was out looking at the stars and smelled a rank smell and heard a growl that went through her bones. You better believe I will be hunting that swamp next September looking for footprints. Okay, that one's really interesting because they say whenever you encounter Bigfoot, Sasquatch, apparently they stink really bad. So the fact that there was a lingering nasty smell and then a growl when this person was outside, I don't know. My father recounted his encounter to me. He was an honest, good man. His dog was barking one night, and he went out with a flashlight to investigate the reason. Blazer was barking at the apple tree near a stream at the back of his property. Suddenly, something flew out of the tree and knocked Blazer over. The object thrown was an apple. My dad went back into the house and got his shotgun. When he came back out, he saw several large figures moving down the stream, away from his house, and they were hooting to each other. Blazer was still barking, but he could hear the hooting as well. He let them go, and he said they looked like large, hairy humanoids. When I was really young, probably about 5 or 6, my family went camping at the tippy top of the mountain, and you really couldn't get higher on said mountain. There was a lake we were camping next to, so of course my family was fishing. My dad and mom, my uncle and I were on the shore trying to get some fish. Across the shore, on the other side of the small lake, my dad had noticed a huge, brown-black humanoid figure just standing still and faced right at us. It had to have been 8+ feet tall, maybe even taller since it was so far away. So like any human would naturally do, my dad tried yelling at it, since he had thought it was a prank of some sorts. I don't remember what my dad said, but I remember the sound the creature made back. It wasn't anything we understood, just a kind of unintelligible screeching. It did, however, sound like he knew what he was saying, if that makes sense. like he was saying something to us, only in his language. We were all looking at it at that point. My grandparents and my big brother had joined us. I remember my parents attempted to recreate the screeches he was saying, and he would respond. This went on for just a couple of minutes. Then the creature took off, and I mean took off. Mind you, the entire time he was on 2 feet, much like a human. He turned and started running towards the forest and was out of sight in seconds. He had to have been running like 25 to 30 miles per hour. My brother, grandpa, and dog tried chasing it, definitely the smart thing to do, and went to where we had seen him at in the direction he left in. They did find a huge lump of black hair that was stuck in a barbed wire fence, although I'm not certain it was really from that creature. Tell me why we didn't leave. We spent the night still, in tents. It was very windy, and I don't think anyone actually slept. I think about it from time to time, but it honestly isn't that rare of an encounter in Utah. I've seen UFOs, my siblings have seen Skiggly Wigglies, my brother was followed by a UFO, and I lived right by Skiggly Wiggly Ranch my whole life. I promise my family is not a bunch of kooks. Well, maybe a little, but not in the sense we all made up the same encounter. This one's kind of sad to me, like, the Bigfoot was, like, trying to communicate with them, and he didn't attack them even though they camped there, and he totally could have. I just feel sad, like it must be like a lonely life being a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot. And I'm on my period, like I'm gonna cry. That being said, if that happened to me though, I would not have stayed and camped. I would have left. Let us know in the comments if you have ever encountered Bigfoot. Let's read some glitch in the Matrix type stories. I just went to Reddit and typed in glitch in the Matrix creepy stories, and I came across this thread, what's the creepiest glitch in the Matrix or unexplainable thing that's ever happened to you? And these are some of the stories that I found. When I was about 9, I broke a dish and was sent up to my room. I went up and felt strange, like I was in an unfamiliar place. I don't know why. I got chills and very cautiously nudged the door open to look inside. My room was all different. There was different furniture. I felt an icy stab in my chest when I noticed the silhouette of a man against my brightly lit window. I managed to let out a "sorry" before bolting down the stairs, screaming for my parents. They went up and just shook their heads. Sure enough, the room was normal. I just forgot about this as I got older. Years later, our long-term neighbors sold their place, and the new family had just moved in. They had a daughter about my age, 17 at the time. I noticed her right away because she was gifted and didn't seem shy about it given her choice of attire. One day, I was upstairs in my room and noticed her in the backyard. I couldn't help but stare, especially because the downward angle gave me an even better peek. So I just stood there like a creepy teenager staring at this girl. Then I heard a tiny "sorry" behind me and the door shutting. This scared me to death until I remembered what happened when I was 9. I ran downstairs to my parents, just as before. I asked them if they remembered the time I broke the dish and they sent me upstairs. I asked if they remembered when I said my room was different. They said I was always keen to make up bullshit stories to get out of trouble, but they did recall me saying that there was a man in my room looking out the window. Okay, that's crazy. He literally saw himself. That's creepy. When I was 25, I was driving home from the paint store and was waiting at the stoplight off the freeway exit ramp. While waiting, I heard brakes of a car screeching behind me. When I looked in my rearview mirror, I saw a car was about to hit my vehicle. The next thing I know, I am outside of my SUV, and I see the paint extension pole that I had just purchased went right through my skull. Blood and brains on the windshield. I remember just looking at the wreck. I wasn't scared. I wasn't feeling anything. Then the next thing I remember, I am sitting back inside of my car. Again, I hear the screeching brakes of a car behind me. Again, I look in the mirror, and the car looks like it will hit mine, but the car moves to the left and passes by mine without hitting it. It went through the red light and managed to avoid crashing into anything. When the car passed me on the left, I swear the person in the passenger seat was looking at me with a look of surprise or horror. In my mind, I imagined they remembered or saw what I had. I remember sitting at the light for a few seconds thinking, what just happened? It was such an odd thing to witness or make up in my head. I had never had anything like that happen before. Then the light turned green and I just drove myself home. It just so happened that this outing was the very first time I had ever left my baby. I just wanted to get home to her. There is a part of me that believes my body may have had a different soul, and my soul is a walk-in. The accident was for the previous soul to experience the death, and my soul came into the body to live the rest of the life in this body. From what I have been told, walk-ins do spend time with the previous soul so that they are familiar with the life, and the previous soul does stay for a while to assist with the new soul in the body. People who saw me after this did tell me how much I had changed. I had just got married and had a baby, so that changes a person too. But one odd thing was that my hair used to be dark, huge, and curly. Then after this, it started to straighten and turn gray. That is like some Final Destination stuff. I have actually never heard of like souls walking in and like taking place of another soul, but that's very interesting, and now I'm wondering if that's ever happened to me. Anyway, let us know in the comments if you have ever experienced like a glitch in the Matrix type situation. Let's read a couple scary stories that were sent to us. So, I'm friends with this guy I met in a VR game recently. We started playing together a lot, and I really got to know him. He said he lived with his parents in the Appalachian Mountains, so I asked, "Have you ever had anything scary happen to you?" And he told me that back when he was younger, he used to be a really dumb kid and used to climb on the roof of their house and scream very loudly after seeing a video of a Skiggly Wiggly story in the Appalachians. He told me that in the video it said not to whistle at night, and as you might have guessed, he climbed up onto the roof around 1 a.m. and he whistled. For a while, nothing happened, but after about half an hour, he heard a faint scream in the distance, followed up by a deep roar. He said it didn't sound like a bear or anything that we know of, and he later told me he thought it was a good idea to sneak out at night, even though his parents told him not to. So he waited a few weeks, and one evening, while his parents weren't home, he went out into the woods. He said he walked for like a mile when he heard fast and loud footsteps to his left. He looked, but didn't see anything, but all of a sudden, he heard a roaring sound above him, and when he looked up, he saw something that didn't look human. He began to run back home, but he could hear this thing right behind him. Just when he thought it was over, gunshots rang out from the nearby road. Turns out his dad was on his way home, driving by the forest, and he heard the roar and saw my friend running from something, so he shot at it. 3 weeks later or so, my friend kept hearing tapping on his roof. One day, he opened the windows and something grabbed him, but he was able to get away. Luckily, his parents believed him and they moved houses, but they still live in the Appalachian Mountains. Finally, parents that believe their kid. And don't be whistling at night. Okay, this next one is from the Philippines. My roots come from spiritual healers. The line ended with my great-grandma when she failed to pass it down. I was in the province to visit my friends and family, and one thing to note is that the house I was staying in was filled with historical relics. In that house, there was a bayonet that was used in the Second World War and a mirror that predated American colonization. The visit was normal at first. Then at night, we were sharing scary stories, and my eldest cousin recalled how one of my cousins, let's call him Roger, was once swayed around in a swing by an entity. We laughed it off. Some were scared, some were messing around. The first and second days were normal, riding bikes, motorcycles, setting off firecrackers, the usual stuff boys would get into when left alone. The third day was rather eerie. I was alone in the living room beside that old mirror when the power suddenly went out. It was sunset, but because of the house's positioning, it was completely dark inside. I noticed one of the doors inside the house had opened. It was odd because the door automatically closes, but somehow it was now open. I went to see what caused this strange phenomenon. However, as I got closer, a figure materialized in front of me. I don't know if it was an Oswang because I only saw the silhouette, but it reached its hands out to me, calling for my hand. But before I could touch its hand, the power came back on and the door closed. I told this story to my cousin Roger, and he said that if I were to touch that figure, it would have taken me to a place that is not of this realm. Okay, so I looked up what an Oswang was. I hope I'm saying that right. It is the most feared shape-shifting monster in Filipino folklore, often described as a blood-sucking, flesh-eating creature with vampiric or ghoul-like tendencies. Well, it's a good thing you didn't touch it, because that sounds really scary. Let's read another scary Reddit story. Let me preface this by saying I'm not claiming this was any particular phenomenon. I am telling you what happened exactly how it happened. No exaggeration or lying of any kind. 20 years ago, my older brother and I, 19 and 15 at the time, were working a landscaping job in northern Arizona. We had gotten off work at the site around 7 p.m., hopped into his truck, and started the 45-minute commute home. On the way back, there is a dirt road that leads about 20 miles into the middle of the desert. It's there mainly to take dirt bikes out or go four-wheeling, etc., but we would use it as a good spot to stop and smoke while avoiding prying eyes. So we drive a few miles in and park in between these two hills that hide the truck and us pretty well. We've done this about 30 times up to that point, though. Never again after that night. We stop and I commence the ritual of breaking it up to roll. He was talking about something, but I wasn't really listening until I heard his voice change. "Did you hear that?" he asked. We both listened and I heard a strange, high-pitched, tiny sound for a split second and then suddenly complete silence. The desert is actually a pretty loud place at night. I remember realizing that when the sound was gone. As we sat there for maybe 5 more seconds, my brother gasps, starts the truck, and floors it in rapid succession. We're flying out of the desert now, and I'm bouncing like a ball from his reckless driving. I'm asking him, "What the fuck, man?" as we go, but he says nothing. We hit the street, and the lights of a passing car show his face. He is pale and completely wide-eyed with his mouth open. I got scared at seeing so much fear from him and just sat there waiting for him to stop. He finally stopped at a McDonald's parking lot when we got back into town. He started crying. I just pat him on the shoulder and waited. After a few minutes, he asked me if I remember. "Remember what, man? We were in the desert for like 5 minutes before you went flying out like a crazy asshole." He looked at me and started sobbing. He said it had me and he couldn't do anything. He said it took me. At this point, I started putting some things together. It was quiet out, no cars. Looked at one of those billboard clocks and saw it was 11:11 p.m. My brother told me something had grabbed me through my closed passenger window. He had gone for his pistol when he suddenly froze and couldn't move because the thing told him that if he didn't stay right where he was at and wait, that I would die and he would be next. He said he felt it in his heart to be true. The thing that had me was very tall and thin with huge black eyes. He says he doesn't remember anything else about it, just tall and thin with huge black eyes. He sat frozen in absolute terror for hours while the thing disappeared with me into the desert. Then suddenly I appeared in the truck and he gunned it out of there. Over the years, I've talked to him about it twice. He hates to even mention it. He is ashamed, I think, and still very afraid of it. He changed after this, always seeming to be less energetic and a little withdrawn. I wish it wasn't like that. I wish I could help. I told him he is blameless and I thanked him for getting us out of there. That's all I could do. I had considered multiple times to get hypnotized to see if I could ever recover some memories like I've heard other people apparently have. But whenever I think about it, I remember the light flashing over his face and the sheer terror I had seen there. Better not to know, I think. That's one of the stories from my next podcast episode that comes out on Sunday. So make sure you're following me on Spotify because you do not want to miss this episode. Let's read a couple scary stories that were sent to us. Way back in 2024, my grandparents lived in a 2-story house with a very old attic where they stored their belongings. When my family and I had visited them for the first time, my sister immediately felt like someone was watching her from my grandparents' room. She constantly said she heard knocking from the inside of the closet, but when my grandfather checked, no one was there. Apparently that closet was never even used. When I slept in the room my cousin used to sleep in, I would always hear footsteps walking or running toward the door around 2 or 3 a.m. Sometimes my sister and I would see a dark figure outside the window when we were home alone. My grandparents would get scared or angry whenever someone went near the room with the attic hatch. We were strictly forbidden from entering that room or the attic itself. The room was filled with spiderwebs, creepy old dolls, and vintage clothes, and there were visible scratch marks on the walls. Whenever my sister and I walked past that room while home alone, we could hear humming and scratching sounds coming from inside. We never knew what was truly in that attic until we finally confronted our grandparents. My grandpa told us the history of the house. Back in the 1900s, a family lived there, and the mother took her own life in the attic after her husband and daughter passed away. We never went back to that house again, and my grandparents moved in with us. That's obviously very scary, but also very, very sad. I live in rural Louisiana. The closest grocery store is an hour drive any direction. Hunting is a big part of my life as I grew up doing it. The woods are just such a peaceful place to be. One day, I was hunting like I usually did during the fall. I was sitting in my box stand when I saw something black moving behind the bushes. I figured it was a hog, so I brought the gun up to look through the scope. I couldn't clearly see anything as it just stopped moving. I figured it might have been a rabbit or something, and I had scared it off. Right around 6 p.m. or so, it started getting dark outside. I could see an outline of something standing in the tree line. That's when I realized it was dead silent for a while now. I was scared as I stared whatever it was down. I watched it slowly get down to hide under a little bush. It was the most insane thing I had ever seen. I tried getting pictures, but the camera wouldn't focus. I then texted my dad and told him to come get me out of my stand now. He obviously didn't listen and told me I was being dramatic and made me stay until it was completely dark. It got dark quick after that interaction when I started hearing noises. At first it was growling noises, so I stayed as quiet as possible, hoping whoever or whatever it was would get bored and walk away, assuming it was a coyote or something. That's when the scratching began. I could hear scratching on the stairs of my box stand that kept getting faster and faster. I know it wasn't an animal because the speed of this scratching and most animals would stop scratching after a while. Finally, I heard my dad's truck coming to get me, and the scratching just stopped. I was in tears when my dad helped me get out, and he told me I was just seeing things. Once we got out of the woods, I took a snap of my face to explain what happened to my friend. I noticed my right pupil was a lot bigger than my left, which was super abnormal for me. Weird things started happening at my house after that. Things falling, cabinets opening by themselves, doors shutting suddenly, cows and dogs going insane around 11 p.m. every night. I really don't know what this creature could have been. I'm going to need my people from Louisiana in the comments. Have any of y'all experienced something similar to this? Let's read another scary story that was sent to us. My parents are divorced, and I ended up moving home to my dad's house. I have a little brother who is years younger than me, so he was very small when I moved in. My room was next to my brother's room, and across the hallway was my dad's room. In the beginning, there wasn't much happening. I started getting sleep paralysis, which I had never had beforehand. It started out small. I would wake up and couldn't move, and my door would be open, which was weird since I had always slept with it closed. I brushed it off since I thought it might have just been a coincidence. Time went on, and the sleep paralysis got worse. I started seeing things. I read up on sleep paralysis and came to the conclusion that it was normal to see things, though I couldn't really get over what I was seeing. But I also couldn't remember everything in detail about what I saw, and that terrified me. I would wake up, not able to move, when the door would slowly creak open. I'm laying on my back and I try to look towards the door, but I can't. So I'm just trying to see it out of the corner of my eye, when a small, dark-haired girl crawls up to my bed and just sits in this weird crouched position while tilting her head and smiling. I had never in my life felt so unsafe and unsettled. Her eyes were gone, just sockets of darkness, and it was like I could feel her malicious intent. A year went by with this almost nightly, and every morning I would wake up to my door open. My little brother was getting bigger and finally started to walk and talk. I would spend a lot of time babysitting him, especially at night, since my dad worked the night shift. One night I was babysitting him. I walked to the living room because I heard him giggling and talking to someone. When I walked in, he immediately turned towards me, and his happy face fell, and instead he looked scared. I was a little weirded out since he's never been scared of me. Even when he is in trouble, he isn't scared of me. So I sat down and asked him what he was doing and who he was talking to. He looked behind me 3 or 4 times before answering, "She doesn't like you." I'm pretty freaked out and ask, "Who doesn't like me?" He looked behind me again before placing his little hand on my mouth and shushing me. Later that night, I woke up out of nowhere to see my door wide open and the red sensor light illuminating a small child in the hallway. I freaked out at first. The sight was pretty terrifying, until I realized it was my brother. I went to him to ask him why he was up and what he was doing. He didn't answer at first, just pointed behind me. I have never been so scared as I swung around to see what he was pointing at, only to find nothing. I asked him what he meant as there was nothing there. He got a bit angry with me because I didn't believe him. I went to put him back to bed, and I pressed him for a bit more information. He told me that the dark-haired girl won't let him sleep. She keeps wanting to play. When he mentioned the dark-haired part, a shiver ran down my spine, and I felt true fear. I didn't want to scare him, so I just told him to go to sleep and tell her that he isn't old enough to play at night. This made him smile. The last part was a small running joke we had, because he didn't understand that I was old enough to go to parties when he was sleeping. This started to happen often. He would stand in the hallway or be talking to someone. My dad mostly brushed it off to him having a big imagination, until one night I had sleep paralysis and woke up to deep scratch marks going down my legs. Like you could see where the marks started and ended. That's when I finally had enough and asked my dad for help. He didn't really believe any of this, but he did have a friend who was a medium. She came by and she recorded the conversation we had in my room and my brother's to see if we would catch anything. We were actually able to catch a girl's voice saying hello, and it definitely wasn't my voice or hers. Way too high-pitched, way too perfect. It was almost clearer than our voices on the recording. I moved the hell out of there as fast as I could, though it didn't help, to be honest. I moved into a house in the forest. There was at least 2 to 3 kilometers to the nearest neighbor. You had to go by my house no matter what if you wanted to go into the forest. I would hear footsteps walking the hallways. I would hear hushed voices from rooms I wasn't in. Even my dog didn't like the forest, which I didn't know or understand until one night. My dog ran away, and I thought that with all the wildlife, he would head into the forest, so I went to look for him. We have no real predators in my country. The biggest threat are foxes. I walked and called for him for about 30 minutes when I saw eyes reflecting back at me from the bushes. I was relieved thinking it was my dog, but as I got closer, it stood up. It stood up and it was taller than me even from meters away, and suddenly I heard whistling behind me. A slow, deliberate whistling, which froze me on the spot. I was the only person in this forest, and I knew that no one had come by my house for hours, and people weren't even allowed in the forest after sunset anyway. I ran and didn't look behind me until I reached my house, but there were no lights on in my house, and I knew that I had left them on when I went looking for my dog, since it makes it easier to find the way home when it's extremely dark. My dog didn't even go into the forest. He instead headed into town, which was kilometers away. I never even walked that route with him. I always take him into the forest, so I don't get why he would walk into town. Then I moved again because fuck no, I'm not staying at some haunted forest. That's when I realized that moving won't help. I moved into my current apartment and things just keep happening. I have security cameras since my dog has separation anxiety and doesn't like being alone. It started with the dog this time. I was at work watching the live security when he suddenly got up and started dancing and jumping towards the door as if I was walking in greeting him. Then he suddenly walks towards the bed and starts growling. Not the "I don't like that" growl, the most aggressive and angry growl I have ever heard from him. Other times, I just see a human-sized shadow following him around the apartment. I can't find my things sometimes, and then they turn up in the weirdest places. I found a sentimental small vase stuffed inside one of my shoes. I honestly have no idea how that is possible since those two things have never been near each other. The most uncomfortable thing I experienced while living in this current place was when I was in the shower and I suddenly heard and felt heavy footsteps. The kind that I could feel vibrate the floor and hear as if it was just outside the shower curtain. I ripped the shower curtain away to see if anyone was there. I brushed it off until it happened again about 30 seconds later. The steps were so heavy that I couldn't brush it off. It really felt as if a really big man was walking around, but I only heard those 2 steps. Okay, that is terrifying, and I don't know if this person is like haunted, like if something is like attached to them and following them around, or maybe this person is just really sensitive to the spiritual world. Anyway, that is really creepy, and if you're from Denmark, leave a comment if you've ever had anything spooky happen to you. Let's read another scary Reddit story. Let me start this off by saying that it is imperative that you stay off the dark web. No matter what anyone tells you, no good can come from using it, and I am about to tell you why. I was 15 at the time. I had come home from school on a Friday afternoon ready to relax, kick back, and enjoy the short break. I had started using code about a year prior and was practicing it daily. Now, I had known about the dark web before this took place. This particular day, however, I decided to venture further and really take a look at the dark web. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with the iceberg diagram representing the internet's content. I heard stories about what goes on the deep web, but I didn't really believe that they were all legit, so I hopped on Tor and began to see what I could dig up. I started off by going on the hidden wiki and browsing through various websites, most of which contained illegal things. I clicked on a random forum link which took about a minute to load. I wish I could remember the name of it. It was a forum where people could pick a topic they wanted to talk about, such as politics, dealing with mental health, etc. There was one particular one that caught my eye. The link was in all red while the rest were all black, and it said, "Not for the weak. Enter at your own risk." Curious as to what it was, I clicked on the link and it brought me to a forum that had only one link on the whole page. I clicked on this link and it brought me to a chat room. I realized that nobody was saying anything in it, only sending links. This set off alarm bells in my head because I had an idea of what was on these links. I wish I had listened to my gut feeling, which was telling me to close out while you still can. However, the ignorant, curious teen took over me, and I started setting up some protection for myself using the codes I had learned. I later realized this amateur coding I did would not protect me from these advanced people with malicious intent. I clicked on a random link and a page loaded surprisingly fast. It looked to be another chat room. I went to type hello or something, but it wouldn't let me. I sighed and began moving my mouse to go to the previous page when a noise went off. I had received a chat. The message said, "Hello, new user. I see you have found my site. Would you like to continue?" I tried typing again, but I still couldn't. The next message sent chills down my back, and my hands are shaking just recalling it. It read, "No, son, not the keyboard." I tried turning off my computer, but of course nothing worked. Another message popped up saying, "I guess I'll take that as a no." The screen suddenly changed and a video began playing. It was a black screen, but I could hear a deep male voice say, "Unfortunately for you, you do not have a choice." I grabbed a sticky note and put it over my webcam, and the voice on the screen said, "Ah, so we're playing games now." The video then began to change, and I realized the man was taking his hand off the camera. He was a short man, but that brought me no comfort. He held up a knife and said, "Name any body part." I then for the first time noticed a cloth in the corner of the room covering something up, which I could only assume to be a body. I had had enough. I unplugged my computer and laid on the floor panting for hours until I could finally get up. I now suffer from anxiety and won't touch a computer unless I have to. Just be safe out there, guys. Okay, so let's not go on the dark web. And that is one of the stories from my next podcast episode that comes out on Sunday. So be sure you're following me on Spotify so you don't miss the episode.